Welcome to the very first soil seminar of the fall. My name is Alan Lee, and I have the pleasure to present to you Amy Wells. Amy is a master's student in JT Cornelius's Soil Res 3 lab, and she has presented in PRSSS, presented and has won an award in the CSSS. And for today's presentation, she's going to continue her CSSS presentation. And without further ado, let us give Amy a warm welcome.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Alan. I'm really excited to get a bit more into the weeds today because I have half an hour instead of just 12 minutes. So this is the extended edition of the presentation that I gave at the CSSS annual meeting earlier this year on how we can make soils more accessible through the use of radiance fields. So as a bit of background on who I am, I'm from Calgary, Alberta, which is Treaty 7 territory. That is the territory of the Blackfoot, the Stoney, and the Tsuut'ina nations. And I got my undergrad here. So I've been here for, like I said, this is my 7th year at BC, which is pretty crazy to think about. And the whole time I was doing architecture on the BC science. If you're wondering why I have a bit of a background in computer graphics and modeling related things, that's one of the big things. Now, I'm a soil res student, as Alan mentioned, and I'm doing two kind of completely separate research projects. So I was going to find a way to connect them with my thesis. One of those is on soil silicon stocks, forest ecosystems, and how their segments have been affected by industrial and ancestral land management. The other one is on the emerging media that I'm showing to you today. And I love photography, like watching movies and like thinking about it for a good movie. Video games and virtual reality, which is kind of why I am doing some of the stuff I'm doing right now. My favorite animals are tigers. So this is a reminder for myself and for you that if you have any questions while I'm presenting, I would much rather you, it's a quick question. So big question, raise your hand. If it's a quick question that you just want some clarification, raise your hand and ask during the presentation. Because we're going to cover some things that none of you have any background on because it's computer graphics related. Or at least that's what I expect. We'll find out in a minute. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. So, provide context for why this research is important. It's important to talk about the tools in soil identification that we have right now. Each of those tools has varying levels of environmental context, which are needed to communicate the diversity of soils. You have things like soil monoliths, which are fantastic, but really my favorite teaching tool because you can touch them, you can, like, they're there with you. And you can look at parent material, color, and structure, and do soil classification. But they're missing the environment. You don't know where the context of them is. And they're a bit delicate. I've seen some students like slightly break them. And not every university has them. So they're really foundationally important, but they're not perfect. Then we have photos and videos of soils, and these are super good as well. Anyone can take a photo of soil and share it, especially with how popular mobile phones are these days. But I always find myself wanting to explore beyond the frame of the picture. I want to know what's just on the other side of the soil, okay, or what's just outside of it. And then we have field courses. These are effectively the gold standard in soil education. I don't think anything can ever match just how fantastic they are for education, because you're there in the field experiencing soil with all 5 of your senses. But I think as anyone that's planned a field trip or a meeting with more than like 3 people can attest, logistics get complicated. And they get more and more complicated the more people you involve. In field courses, when we're digging soil pits, that's an inherently destructive process. You can never undig a soil pit, especially in sensitive sites or aerosol or organic soil and archaeological sites. And that's where radiance fields can come in. So, how many of you have heard of radiance fields? Yeah, the people in the lab that I talked to! Yeah! So that's what we're going to get into now. But I have a second question for you. Who here has heard of photogrammetry? A few people? Let's go. That's actually more than I was expecting. There's a lot of applications for it, but a brief definition is that it's art, science, and technology that uses photos, videos, or other media to obtain reliable information about environments or objects. There are a lot of applications of photogrammetry. Can any of you think of them? Mapping, yeah! That's actually the first application I wanted to talk about. So if you've ever used Google Maps, you've done something that relied on photogrammetry. Any other application you can think about? Cool. We also have applications in architecture and architectural visualization. This is a rendering I did on UBC Science where I used a photogrammetry model of San Francisco to provide context for the design we made. We also have applications in soil science. The virtual model collection that Maya helped put together with UBC Studios used photogrammetry. And there's so many other applications of it. But what does photogrammetry actually achieve for us? Why are we using photogrammetry? In the field, we can only take so many photos or make observations. We can see them. Sampling costs time. And we can't take a billion photographs, we have to take a limited set of photos. But we want to be able to view something from any perspective. So photogrammetry lets us synthesize novel views. And there are many approaches to this. The dominant approach historically has been to use mesh-based reconstruction. And this is really good, all things considered. And it works by basically creating meshes that are made of these little itty-bitty triangles. This is actually fairly high density, but each of those triangles basically has a little picture applied to it, and that's how we get the colors. But it has limitations. It struggles with small details, especially when there's big details present. It cannot handle reflective materials, so like water, metal, it just completely breaks down. And it really struggles with transparencies. That's stuff like leaves or water bottles, like Katie's water bottle right there. If you can hold it up for a second, Katie. It's a transparent bottle full of water. You can't do photogrammetry with that. But that's where the volumetric reconstructions, like those using Radiance Field, can come in. Instead of being a continuous object, like the mesh reconstructions, we have a bunch of points distributed throughout space. And these points can have a bunch of properties. And there was a really keystone paper released in 2020 talking about neural radiance fields for NERS. And these are really powerful because you can use machine learning to iterate refine points and apply view-dependent properties. So the basic explanation for view-dependent properties is if you look at the floor and you move your head around, you can see that the reflections change as you're looking at it from different perspectives. That is a view-dependent property that you want to recreate when you make these models. And it does this by basically having really fancy things. And a lot of work has been done to iterate on this, with 3D Gaussian splats, 2D Gaussian splats, triangle splitting. They're all just different methods for doing this volumetric reconstruction. And an effort to make the reconstructions more accurate and easier to render. And by that I mean, or by rendering, I mean the ability to do it on your screen. So basically taking 3D models and we're drawing it on your screen, rendering it basically. So within soil science, there are a couple of feasible approaches, and maybe a third one that I just found today that we can use. One of those is 3D Gaussian splats. And so that's the current approach that I've been researching the most, because it's capable of real-time rendering on pretty much any device in this room, which is pretty amazing when you consider just how much detail is present in these models. These are rendered images. These are not the photographs that were in the field. And there's a lot of software support for these. So it's a really viable option. Triangle splatting is another option that I'm going to explore in the future if I have time and energy for it, because I'm going to be busy with silicon here in the future. And it potentially brings the best of both worlds together by combining those triangles, which GPUs, or we'll talk about GPUs later, are really, really, really good at rendering. They can render millions, tens of millions in every second. And so it might be really good at reconstructing this because it uses that volumetric approach with triangles. But what is a Gaussian splat? That's probably something you're all thinking, what is it? So Gaussian splats are basically funny little points in space that we can stretch, we can squish, and we can break them apart to add more, or we can just completely remove them in order to fit in input images. And they use spherical harmonics, which I like to think of as like electron orbitals. I don't think this is accurate. I think of them as like this though, to justify how they work. But basically uses spherical harmonics, or what has electron orbitals is like a thing to capture the color and transparency for those view-dependent properties. So when we put them side by side, this is a soil pit at Totem Field that I did earlier in the summer. Our soil looks fairly good in the measurement reconstruction, but this bottle looks horrible. And the plants don't look like plants. But in the Radiance Field, it looks like it did in real life, which is really amazing. And it's a smaller file and it renders almost as fast on hardware that was 8 years old when I took this image. But we have a problem. How do we go and capture soils consistently? I should probably take a step back. Why do we need a method to capture soils specifically, and specifically soils? Just because a lot of professional photogrammetry, and this is based on what I've seen in the literature, is frequently done with these elaborate multi-camera capture rigs, which that's an example of 22 cameras. That's tens of thousands of hardware, and it's also a lot of weight, where you can't realistically bring us into the field. That's like taller than a person. And existing methods in literature also focus on aerial photography for mapping and studio capture, but not really single device infill capture. And also a standard procedure will make it accessible to anyone in this room. You can go with your phone and consistently capture successful radiance fields if you have a step-by-step process. At least that's the hope. But so when I went into this process, I had a couple of requirements for the capture procedure. The first is that it's feasible for a single person to do. That's where that single device comes in. Then we needed to be protecting data sovereignty, which is especially important as a lot of us are working with indigenous nations. We need to make sure that we're not relying on external companies to have good data security, to protect the data, especially in the case that we go capture something and then they're like, wait, no, we don't want to show this because of the quality of the reconstruction or whatever reason. They might want to revoke permission later on. So it's really important to protect data sovereignty. So that's why I haven't gone out and used popular applications like Polycam, which additionally is expensive. So I'm very cheap with this project, even though the hardware is expensive. Then it should also be able to be done on a variety of devices. So my phone or my nice mirrorless camera, which I've been practicing by saying I don't have anything, I do have it, so that's kind of fun. And it ultimately has to be quick, simple, and easy. Under 15 minutes for soil picks. More time, it's like, oh, that messes up our sampling plans, and it has to be have a consistent step-by-step procedure. That way you can forget parts of it, but then as you get into the groove, it just follows back. So to make the procedure, I took an iterative development process. I started by going in the field to capture media, then I processed that media, generated a radiance field, reviewed it, and figured out what went wrong. So I did a bunch of this captures of like 102A, the teaching lab, the form, my brother's kitchen, my dad's bookshelf, actual soil pits. It's a lot harder to capture soil pits when it's raining. So I've done a lot of work to develop them. And so from this all, I had a bunch of lessons learned. First is with opening the soil pit. This is a surprisingly important step in the process. Because I found that if the soil pit's too small, you just don't have enough room to work to make a radiance field. You might have enough room to sample for chemical and physical analyses, but not for capturing a photo. So I found that about 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters is large enough that you could comfortably take photos, and you wouldn't be blocking too much light to your body or the device you're taking photos with. I also realized that your diagnostic base in the soil pit, the one that you have the most claimed the best, should be in the full shade, as casting a shadow can mess up the capture. Then I also learned a lot about capture devices. While my camera takes excellent video and excellent photos, I found that the photos it took were significantly better for reasons. It just had more information to work with. With my iPhone, I found the opposite. Videos were a lot more consistent than the photos. That's because the video mode had greater control. So it varies from capture device to capture device. But importantly, you need to have a wide angle lens. By this I mean, you want to see as much of the environment as possible. If you only see like this, you have to take a lot more photos than you can see like this. And so having a wide angle lens speeds up the capture. And it also makes the capture a lot more consistent. And speaking of capture, I found that simple patterns were key to consistently reconstructing environments. So in a quarter, do the same thing a bunch of times. I won't get into the whole process because it's very repetitive, which is good. But you basically can capture along the border, just within the pit, and in around the environment to reconstruct the whole space. we target to have about 1/3 of each picture overlap with the previous one. The key, which I keep reminding myself is to be slow and steady, and then I'll have success. The captures where I rush are the worst captures I've done, unfortunately. Then we take all our hundreds of photos or multi-gigabyte videos just because we're recording at such high data rates, and we process it. First thing that we do is remove all the blurry photos because that's garbage going in. Put garbage in, you get garbage out. So we want to clean our data set. Then we want to correct the white balance. I can explain this later at the end of the presentation if you have questions, but basically we're just making the colors accurate to a known reference. Because if it's too orange or too blue or too green or too magenta, then everything else will be gone. Then the other thing you have to do is to make sure that everything is visible. So using these photos on the left, we can see that this one, the sky is completely blacked out. This one, you can't see anything in the soil pit. And this one, it just looks kind of sad. So we can, it just looks kind of sad. So we can edit the photos, and we can recover the sky, we can cover the soil pit to make sure that everything's visible and on an SDR display. And then we need to add a touch of artistic direction. Because if it's perfectly accurate, but doesn't feel right, then you'll be taken out of it. So it's important to make sure that it feels right while remaining as accurate as possible. So you can tweak things a little bit, just make it fit what you feel it should be. Then we gotta do the first computationally intensive step, which is structure from motion. This is basically best described as, if you've heard of parallax, it's basically using parallax to align stuff in space. We can use the movement of our camera, or we can use the position of points that we can find in space, be it like a little rock or a sharp point or something. They appear a little bit on thousands of points on each image. We can see how those points move as the camera moves within 3D space. And this is how structure from motion works. And that's why it's important to have about 1/3 overlap on each image so you can actually watch as the points move through space. But then I have a question for you. How do we know how large what we captured actually is?
Some reference.
Yeah, being a reference. That's fair. April tags come in. And this is something I learned after I went and captured a bunch of things and was like, that didn't go so well. How do I make it better? And these April tags, which are these funny little QR codes, basically, they're not actually QR codes, but it's the same kind of idea. They assist in the reconstruction process by providing a easily recognizable for a computer pattern that you can use to have known positions in 3D space and helps just tie everything together. And because we have these points, we can put them at known distances from each other, like in this little flag, and we can use that to correct the absolute scale. So we get our relative positions from structure from motion, and we can correct the absolute scale with April tags. And if you need soil tapes, I have a bunch of soil tapes in, because I made some as part of the process. Then we get to the most computationally and time-intensive step of the process, the actual 3D Gaussian slotting part. This draft render, so this is not as good as I would hope it to actually be, took 2.5 hours to produce at like midnight on Tuesday or something. With the full resolution one predicted to take over 2 days. So if you ever heard me talk about I want a more powerful GPU, it's to make this process faster and to let me do it with more images at higher resolutions, so the final quality is even better. And this basically works by taking all those cameras that are positioned in space and it projects the little splats onto the model, and then it compares it to the source images, and it just keeps doing that with convolutional neural network to slowly get a really beautiful result like this one. Oh, I forgot I had this little but it's okay. And by gradually iterating on the process, I got slowly better and better and better models. Early on, they looked like garbage, and that's okay. I'm not trying to recover them someday, because you can recover some of this with better processing, but it might just be completely screwed. But I got to a point where I stopped using my iPhone for things and I just switched off the camera, and that's just because I like the character of these models a bit better than this. This just feels overly sharpened to me. There's like a lot of extra white artifacts. But I think that's just from the nature of how my iPhone takes video. But that's because it's art. And I prefer the art of my camera, art of my phone. I have we have a new problem. We have these models. How do we use them? Well, first thing that we're going to be doing, and I'm really excited that Marianne from the Emerging Media Lab is here today, is because we're going to be expanding Soil Web. Soil Web is an initiative started in 2004 by Maya, who unfortunately can't be here today because she's visiting family in Serbia. I hope that's been going wonderfully. But it's a wonderful project supported by 21 institutions and is a platform for a variety of soil education learning resources, like basic soil science principles, soil classification, the virtual monolith collection. If you've ever seen it, it's very good. I highly recommend you check it out. But we're going to expand it with an online portal to explore soils that allows students to dive into that relationship between people, land, and soil. We can use it in Outbound 200, maybe next year, depending on how development in the next couple of months goes, for sustainable soil management, or by 301, soil landscapes that Alyssa, who is not here right now, could potentially use in classes in future with JT, or at other institutions outside of UC. I've had some interest in CGLS from like people in Saskatchewan or Regina or Ontario. A bunch of people are really excited for this because of how they construct the environment. And I have time to do this quickly, so I'm going to quickly. Yeah. No, that's not it. We'll do that afterwards. But we can look at a model in a minute. Then the other thing that I'm super excited about, because of my passion for virtual reality, is the idea of virtual soils. For this, I have a bit of a video that we can watch.
Hey, can I show you something cool? My name is Amy Wells. I'm a master's student in the SoilRes 3 lab at the University of British Columbia. I'm really excited to introduce you to the concept of virtual soils. Virtual soils is a combination of multiple emerging technologies to enhance soil science education and science communication. The first of these technologies are Radiance Fields utilizing 3D Gaussian splatting. This allows for the reconstruction of real-world environments and landscapes far beyond the level possible with traditional photogrammetry. The second technology is virtual reality. This concept utilizes a popular application called VR Chat and allows for these digital reconstructions to become a truly immersive experience. This combination of virtual reality and radiance fields will let students and professionals alike actively explore a greater diversity of soils than ever before. From the comfort of my home in British Columbia, I can actively explore a soil 2,000 kilometers away in Manitoba, or one just down the street. With further development, virtual soils could span the globe, letting students in Canada and beyond understand the global diversity and importance of soils. These virtual soils experiences could take a variety of forms. For instance, students could work collaboratively to identify soils, examining their color, structure, and properties like effervescence on a diversity of soils beyond what is feasible with field courses today. Researchers could share results of research on the scale of landscapes from the comfort of community centers, leading guided tours on what they researched and the future implications of their work. Professionals and researchers could do virtual presentations of the soil they study without needing to physically bring collaborators together, enabling all participants to understand the context in the field regardless of distance. The potential within virtual soils is vast, and I hope you are as excited as I am for where the future may lead.
Yeah. So that's the brief concept of the VR virtual soils, which is something that I'm really excited about and hopeful to develop in coming years with the Media Lab further, as it will allow students to have those immersive experiences. I think some of the people here have tried it. John's tried it. Is it cool?
Super cool.
Yeah! And JT's tried it. We've had some people from the Learning Center try it. Les tried it? Yeah, Les tried it too. What did you think, Les? 2 thumbs up! So it can be applied in a variety of contexts, and I've already been using it with some of my friends to show them soil science, because it's really hard to just explain, and when you have a graphic element, it's way easier to explain. And so the other day, literally earlier this week, I took a bunch of my friends after we watched Moles, the movie, to go look at soil bits in virtual reality. It was a lot of fun. It was actually so great. It was like very meta. It was awesome. And we're actually applying it in a couple weeks here at the FAO from Seeds to Foods 2025 convention in Rome, Italy, to showcase the forest garden ecosystems that have been stewarded by the Tehila Station, which is a research community that our lovely Miriam has been doing a lot of research with on the forest gardens, and she is in the model that we're going to be sharing with them, which makes me terribly happy. So, what are the next steps of this project? First one is to expand the database. So that's like I need to go finish processing the radiance fields that I've captured. It's another 5 of them to you right now, I think. And actually, I have one of mine. Oh god. And to provide resources on how others can contribute, and also to capture more soils myself. And I'm really excited to start working with the Emerging Media Lab next week to further develop the web-based virtual soils from just being on my website, but also being part of SoilNet. Then to work slowly on refining the virtual soils concept, the VR part that is, to end up outline future development plans for future projects. And finally, to implement it in courses at PBC and beyond. Now, I'd like to give a special thanks to a bunch of my friends, to TLEF for funding the project, BBC Studios, EML, the Soil History Lab, the Learning Center, and Tehila Station, as well as a bunch of friends and people that I share a lot of copy with, like Les, Roxanne, Lewis, my brother Nelson Sexton for helping out with a bunch of development consultation, my friends Jinx, Felix, Ira, Lexi, and Kiara for helping with presentations. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
How many hours did it take to put the presentation together? Because it looks like an enormous undertaking.
Yeah. I don't want to say 40 hours, but probably 40 hours.
That's all?
Well, that includes just making the presentation. That doesn't include like making the VR stuff or like the website. If you include that, it's probably hundreds and hundreds of hours.
Worth it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you went into this. How many photos do you generally need?
Typically, I try and capture around. The lowest I've gotten away with is around 100 photos. You get a lot more consistently successful results if you have like at least 200. Some of the models that look absolutely fantastic, like the Forest Garden and Flips Farm, have like 468 photos. So it's really variable. But generally speaking, having more time to take more photos that are sharp and in focus will lead to a more successful structured promotion for the camera track and a more successful generation. So more is better, but you can get away from it. Yes.
I just have a question that kind of builds on that. But first of all, really great. That was really fun. And this is my first soil session. Yeah. So when you're like planning your photos, are you kind of staging it like are you planning out how you're going through the process?
Let me go back here. So this is probably the best picture I have to explain it. And if you're wondering why this kind of figure is rendered, it's just because taking a photo that explains this in tricky. If you so I basically I will stage the environment. Absolutely. I will get rid of random garbage that shouldn't be part of it. I'll include things that I think should be part of it. And then I will basically just take a photo of the corner and follow a pattern and go in the middle of the pattern. It's just peeps and basically do the same pattern that I just asked. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. Then I saw a question in the chat asking about exposure. That is actually something that's out of the presentation because I had it be confusing, but I kept it in the goodness, that's a great question. How do we deal with light variation? The approach that I've been applying is attempting, and this is why I use my camera instead of my phone, because it's a lot easier to do, is I have a constant exposure. So throughout the whole scene, every single photo is taken with the same settings. So I try and go f8 to f10. This is basically how wide open the lens is. So f8 is fairly tight. And this reduces the depth of field. And by depth of field, I mean that if you take a photo with a lot of depth of field with the subject close to the camera, the background will be really blurry. And the opposite will be true. If you take a photo with a lot of depth of field focusing on something distant, the foreground will be blurry. And so at f8, you get something that's not too dark, because the higher your aperture is, the darker it gets, but you have a decent depth of field for stuff that's relatively in focus. Then you want to minimize the ISO. This is basically the noise in the image, but it's the amplification of an image. So the higher it is, the more noise in the image you'll have. But the most important thing is to have a sharp picture. So sometimes you have to raise it because you can't always expose with shutter speed. Here I use 1/30th of a second as the exposure time. Here I use 1/60th. This is a lot sharper because my hands are shaky. And if I shake the camera too much, then the image is shaky. So I raised the ISO and lowered the shutter speed to have a sharper image. But you ultimately want to have that your ISO as low as possible, as that just adds noise and or garbage into your images. Does that answer the question from online?
Good, Miss Anya? Yeah.
Okay.
Christy asked about, using the tripod.
No, I did try it. I started with my tripod, and I opened the soil pit at Photo Field. I did a capture with my tripod, and it just got in the way. So I ended up designing it. It's more trouble than it's worth. Lug around an extra like 5 pounds.
You did a stick tripod?
Well, I don't have a stick tripod.
Those are inexpensive.
Yeah, but I'm cheap. Any other questions? Sean.
Very, very cool presentation. So without a measurement tool in the image, can you use something from the computer to tell you what depth or what distance? With that?
With some capture approaches, you can approximate. I've gotten some models without reference close to accurate, but there'll always be error without an absolute reference. The approach I'm using, which is structure from motion, uses a single lens, but there are systems that use basically 2 cameras right next to each other, which I think is MVS or like multi-view stereoscopy or something. And because you have the 2 lenses, then you can figure out how big stuff is, because that's how our eyes figure out how big stuff is. So, kind of, but having a known reference that you can just print and put on the barrel is pretty, it makes things so much simpler.
Right. So yeah, there's some images that you had up there that didn't actually have a
Oh.
color in them.
So as long as it's present in the whole model, so I got rid of that figure. So you don't need to have it present in every image, but if you have it in the scene that you're capturing and you successfully capture it as part of things, then you can use that to track everything else, because structure for motion gets the relative positions of everything, and the table tags give you the absolute scale of things, using that as points as reference.
Cool. So you can zoom into an area and still know, even though you don't have the ruler in the image, you know where.
Yeah.
Nice. And then follow up to that is what kind of resolution do you get if you're sitting with
That is a great question. I will just show you. This is going to be really hard to do because I'm using the stand back in the room. So this is the virtual soils web. You can use sample. And here's a resolution. So pretty good. think this is even the best model I had. I have one from the ALS. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What one finish one arm? Sorry. Have you looked into what LiDAR would do in terms of integrating this? I know like iPhones have their own onboard LiDAR now, right?
iPhone Pros do, but so do iPad Pros. So because I have an iPad Pro that I run at an engineering design, so fantastic for taking notes. I did give it a try in the learning center, and I found that it was really annoying to have to be close enough because the range of my iPad is 5 meters, and in this scene that we're looking at right now, those trees are more than 5 meters away. So it just constantly was becoming an hindrance on the process instead of a useful tool. With if you were to do landscapes though, using a drone with LiDAR does make things significantly better though. Just because we have more information, and at that point LiDAR is like significantly more expensive and captures at much further distances. LiDAR can be useful, but not on a sort of big scale. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Let's go into
Congrats for your presentation. My question is about how many profiles and how many kind of the soil do you use for your work? Because if you decide to validate the technique, you need to different profiles or different kind of soils, I think.
Yeah. So the largest soil print I have captured to date is this one, which was in the concept picture that I shared. And I've reprocessed this. This is the one that I did in Java in the software. This was genuinely a humongous soil print. It is probably bigger than this. From one end of the soil pit to the other end of the soil pit is longer than this pile down the middle of the room. And so you can, with that one, you basically just capture more. You just take the photos with a larger soil pit, but you can do it on large soil pits, and you get still fantastic results. And this is actually a really cool soil because it has some vertic characteristics with the shrink small action happening in the clay. And right here, you can see that like a whole block of soil is falling out. And it has like that really rich, it's like 7.5 YR 1/1. This black trans.
Okay, in this case, I agree with you. But if you have another different kind from the soils, another profile, for me, I think it's a little bit different.
What do you mean?
No, it's different because the specific condition you have now, you have light, is okay in the forest, for example. And what function? I don't know. I think a little bit different.
I have also captured in lower light rainbow with this filter though. Let me just find it. Because it's on my desktop. Because it's not published online yet. Because I was waiting to get confirmation from ALS or ALS that it would be okay to share these models with the public. So this one was from the field school. The background is a little bit funky because I think how this viewer works. But this one we have a really diverse environment with extremely variable lighting. But the soil was still captured extremely well. It's just a little bit different parameters. And then we had another one, which was a little bit further even beyond this one. Where rainbow, this one is at Virginia Mosquitoes. And it's really hard to like not be constantly swatting them away. But we still got a fairly successful capture. Although this one, I did not make the ISO enough, so we ended up blurring photos. But it still looks pretty good, almost the same. And the soil fit wasn't ideal. And yeah. So when you follow the procedure, you get really good soil fits. And you can capture a variety of lighting conditions and environmental conditions. So if it was raining, I would have used my phone instead. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Yes.
If you had different sensors, like infrared or ultraviolet, did you learn even more about the soils by having a different series, perhaps overlaying them?
Probably. I have not even thought about that, but that is a really cool
Bad
idea.
idea, Roger, to tell her something like that.
It's gonna kill you. It's a bad idea because I already don't have enough time to work on this as much as I would like. But I really want to do that now, because then you might be combine it with digital soil morphometrics or something, where you use like photos to extract soil properties at low density. I don't think that's what it's actually called, it's close to that. If you Google that, you'll find the right thing. But then you could potentially, that is a really cool idea. I'm terribly excited about that now. You've given me like a lot more work
And
ideas.
you might even be able to artificially light it
Oh yeah,
and learn about root structures and things.
Yeah, but if I have a different camera that better supports flash photography, what you can do is if you have a flash on the camera and it overpowers the other lighting in the scene, you basically get the soil as if it was not lit when you remove the spherical harmonics. So then you can end up getting like a lot more information at night and potentially learning about the roots and stuff. But there is a lot of potential for it. If I had more money than I spent it on all the random stuff to do things cooler. Budgets are limited, understandably.
Brilliant work. Oh my gosh.
Any other questions? Adam? The VR part is using Unity. This VR chat, the game is built on Unity. And I think for virtual souls, we might end up using Unity, or we might use Godot, because Godot is open source and cheaper. Because it's free. But the viewer itself, this one is using just plain JavaScript. There is a fancier one that I've written EML to add like interactive text elements to that uses 3JS. No, is it 2JS? I don't know. It's something. It might be 2JS. Where's it like an experience of TypeScript that lets you do fancy rendering?
Applause for you.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you very much.
Next week, Emily Dennis from UNBC will be here in person. She works with